If you do have questions, you can throw them in the comments. If you don't want to put them publicly in the comments, you can always feel free to message us directly. If for whatever reason we don't see your question before our live session ends, we'll answer them in the next week's session. And always feel free. We understand sometimes people have questions that they don't feel comfortable putting publicly with their account on the comment section. You can always message us directly for that. And we always put stuff in our stories where you can message in there as well in advance. All right, so we did have one early question. Someone asked about supplements for optimal health, kind of optimal functionality in wellness. Typically, I do generally recommend most people are deficient in vitamin D, multivitamin, B vitamin, zinc and CoQ10 have shown to have a lot of positive effects, especially for immune health. However, before using a lot of these supplements, I would recommend seeing your doctor, maybe even a naturopath, to do some blood work to really find your true nutrient deficiencies, because sometimes you don't need them if you're already at the right level, and dosing more of it could actually be harmful rather than beneficial. Those are kind of my go-tos for most wellness and general health. We use brands that we get through our Fullscript store, which all of our clients have access to as well. If you're trying to buy things on your own, you want to check the label for third-party quality verification. So, of course, my brain just went blank on some of those things, but UPS, no, that's not right. Might be UPC. Let me do one real quick check here. Usually I can pull these off the top of my head, but of course when I gotta do it live, they're not there. Third party. Okay, NSF is one. NSF is one that I like a lot because in addition to just simple purity and potency factors, they're also testing the supplement to pass most collegiate and other sport organization doping tests. Meaning, so I'm sure you guys have probably heard of the Olympics where everyone gets tested to make sure there's nothing performance enhancing in there. A lot of collegiate levels, you do the same testing. NSF certification is meant to assure athletes that there's nothing in there that's going to trigger a unwanted test result on there, which is something you really have to be careful of with a lot of supplements, especially any like multivitamin, especially, but any supplement that's promoting like better energy or better focus or better, like, there's some questionable brands out there that they may be achieving that through ingredients that they're not foreclosing on there. So there may be higher doses of caffeine, and that's what's giving you the energy. There's a lot of other supplements out there that can do similar things, but you have to be very careful about how much you have. So if you're not truly sure of what's in there, it's easy to end up overdosing if you think you're just having a general multivitamin and then you have something else with a lot of ginseng or a lot of other caffeine. You can pretty easily put yourself into overdrive with some things. And that's the reason why athletes trust the NSF testing to assure that they're not getting a whole lot of adverse junk in there that's going to not only disrupt their body and their systems, but also make them fail a doping test should they ever have to when they're competing. The other one, there's another one on here that I usually like, but I'm not seeing it. Listed in here. USP, that's what it is. I knew I had the letters right, just the wrong order. USP is the other one that I usually go by. There's a handful of others, but they're not as highly recognized, I guess you would say. And they don't necessarily look for all of the things in there. Like I said, like one of the downsides of USP is that they're not necessarily checking for a prohibited substance for sport, whereas NSF does check that. So both of them check for the purity, make sure there's no contaminants and other unwanted things, but NSF is the only one out of the two that checks to make sure that there's no prohibited substances for sport competitions. Let's see here. We had another question come in. Okay, so similar with supplements, but focusing on protein powders. There's a couple decent ones. We primarily use Thorn from our online store. It's also NSF tested. It's pretty clean, but still tastes pretty good. Another one that's a little more publicly seen is called J-Rob. And I usually prefer whey protein. Just the protein utilization and digestion is typically higher. That being said, if you can't handle dairy, you may want to look at a vegan protein or I hesitate on recommending soy proteins if you're going to be using it a lot, just because too much soy intake that hasn't been fermented can cause some disruptions on hormonal functions at times, especially if you're using it daily or multiple times a day. So I tend to hesitate on recommending soy protein or soy milk for things anymore. Whey protein, the vegan proteins that are based more on like peas and other legume products that are less heavy on the phytoestrogens like soy is, are usually okay to go with. Those are usually my main go-tos. Personal preference, like I said, the Thorn and J-Rob is because they don't have a lot of the heavy chemical artificial sweeteners involved in there, which is one of my big hesitance with a lot of the protein powder blends, meal replacement bar brands. The artificial sweeteners that they use, almost all of them either have a negative digestive impact with it. So what that means is most sweeteners that aren't carcinogenic in nature, they're a sweetener that our intestines can't absorb. And that's how they kind of bypass the whole calorie absorption aspect and blood sugar response. But just because we can't absorb it, it stays in that digestive tract, makes it to your large intestine, where your local bacterium can process it, and that's where we get a lot of bloating, gas, a lot of other just digestive disruptions and upset because it's just not being digested properly, and it's hitting our biome too heavily. With it, it can actually end up imbalancing the biome levels from where we want them to. So you end up with sometimes prolonged effects with that, rather than just it being a one-time thing in a few hours after you eat it. It ends up lasting for a few days because your biome gets completely out of whack if you're not eating enough other probiotic sources. So that's one thing that I always caution about. And like I said, the other factor is if it's not a sweetener that does that, it's usually a sweetener that well, there's a lot of sweeteners that are in use that have been shown to have carcinogenic effects. And if it's something that you're going to be using daily or even more frequently than that, I hesitate to recommend anything like that because of the more chronic exposure, the more high the risk is that the buildup of that type of substance can cause more potential issues somewhere down the road. Some people are less concerned with that. It's just something that for me, since it's not something I'm willing to readily put in my body, I just don't feel good trying to recommend it to people. That's kind of my take on that. If you do have any other questions following up with that, feel free to throw them in the comments as well. But even with your protein powders, you still want to look for the third-party verifications. Again, USP, NSF are some of the better ones to check for. Just because most protein supplements are still supplements, so they're not going through the exact same aspect as what a food check would be. So you just want to make sure that they're being third-party verified, so there's not any other additives or junk that isn't being reported on the label hidden in the product, which is an unfortunate state of events for where we're at with the supplement industry across all boards. That's one of the reasons why we use our full script storefront for recommendations for our clients. That way, everything on there we already know is third-party verified. It's heavily vetted by the full script company before they're allowed onto the online store, so we don't have to worry about what we're recommending from a purity and potency standpoint for our clientele. We know that they're going to get exactly what's listed on the labels when we make those recommendations for our clients. If you do have any interest in learning more about that stuff, feel free. You can either put a comment down below, or you can message us directly, and we can get you set up with our store account so you can check and access things there. And we do have the functionality to make a full program recommendation based upon what your goals are and what your needs are. If there's anything else going on, we can kind of custom recommend products directly for you as well. All right. Well, I hope that answered everyone's questions. If you are watching this on the replay, feel free to drop questions in the comments below. We'll get to them in next week's live show, and we'll take everything forward from there. In the meantime, have a wonderful week, and remember to stay persistent in your consistent pursuit of health.